This happened on the night of the 2nd. I woke up during the night, sensing a presence, and I saw a police officer in uniform looking down at me. I was more surprised than scared, but I couldn't move. I knew this person wasn't alive. "Shota," he said in a gentle voice. "I'm sorry. I can't hold out any longer. Take care of your mother. I know I wasn't a good father and worked too much, but I really did love you and your mother. Be a strong boy for me, okay?" The ghost appeared to be crying. A strange warmth filled my chest too. But there was just one problem. I wasn't Shota. I wasn't even a boy. And my father was still alive. I had no idea where to even begin. Hey guys, I'm your host Tara A. Devlin, and welcome to this week's episode of Kowabana, true Japanese scary stories from around the internet. In case you haven't picked it up yet, the latest volume of Kowabana, volume 15, is now available, with over 170 stories from the show, collected in easy-to-read format. If you're looking for more chills and thrills, then grab your copy now and don't miss out. This week, we're looking at a classic, Yurei. Sometimes it seems like there are more ghosts than people, and this week we have yet another selection of terrifying tales for you. First up, some cousins who live near each other seem to have a run-in with the same spirit, but what's really going on? Find out in Babies Cry. I heard this story from my friend F-san a few years ago. He went to visit his cousin's house, which wasn't too far from his own at the time. But his cousin looked rather down that day. They decided to eat before F-san left, and as they started drinking, his cousin then opened up. "Something crazy came into my room the other day," he said. Despite being the middle of summer, that night was rather cool, and he thought he'd finally be able to have a good night's rest. But still, he struggled to actually get to sleep. Then, before long, he heard a baby crying. Of course, there were no houses nearby with a baby. And that crying was gradually getting closer and closer. By the time he started to feel like he was actually in danger, it was too late to run. Soon, it wasn't just crying he heard, but a sound like something crawling across tatami mats as well. By the time he heard the crying by his right ear, he then felt a weight pushing down on his chest. He was too scared to open his eyes, so he remained frozen, and soon the baby moved from his chest and continued on its way. And the whole time, it continued crying. F-san tried to make his cousin feel better, noting that if he didn't see that baby the previous night and only the night before that, then it wasn't likely to return. But F-san never imagined in 1,000 years that just a few nights after hearing his cousin's story, that he would hear the same thing too. F-san's room and his cousin's room sat on the same line, meaning it took the baby a few days to crawl from his cousin's house to his house. Then, after passing through F-san's room, nobody was quite sure where it went. The students in this next one love sharing scary stories, but they find themselves perhaps in over their heads when one of them shares a method to actually see ghosts. Will they go through with it? And will the ritual actually be successful? Find out in How to See Ghosts. This happened during my second year of high school. Ever since elementary school, I loved scary stories, and I always read whatever books I could find, and watched whatever TV shows I could about them. Even in high school, I got together with classmates who also enjoyed them and we exchanged scary stories. At the time, I honestly wanted to see a ghost. One day, as I was eating lunch in the classroom, I was sharing scary stories with K, who was kind of like our leader, D and S. Then our classmate Y joined us. Some girls were there screaming over our stories at the time, so he probably wanted to join in the fun. "Hey, K, have you ever seen a ghost?" he asked. "Never. Although I've tried all sorts of things and visited different places to try to see one," he said. "If you really want to see a ghost, then do you want me to tell you how to?" "Huh?" According to Y himself, he could see ghosts and had been able to do so ever since he was a kid. So now, it was no big deal to him. However, depending on the ghost, things could still be rather intense at times, and so it wasn't something to be trifled with lightly. Apparently, he wanted to warn us of that because we were always telling scary stories. "But if you do as I say, you will definitely see a ghost." "Well, do you want to try it?" "Hell yeah! How do you do it?" "For real? I want to try too." Even the other guys got excited about it. According to Y, you had to go to a location where someone died with regret, like a sudden death, a murder, etc., and then sympathize with them from the bottom of your heart. Like, what happened to you was truly terrible. There must have been things you still wanted to do here in this world. If possible, I would switch places with you in an instant. That sort of thing. Then, the ghost would appear before you without fail. We decided to try it out immediately that Saturday. My usual gang of K, D, S, and myself were going to go, along with our senior, S senpai. The girls who were always screaming and carrying on said it was too scary and they didn't want to go. Our destination was a mountain road in O City, on the outskirts of Tokyo. We lived in K City. This was where a 24-year-old officewoman had been attacked and strangled to death. It had happened rather recently, all things considered, and we looked up newspaper articles and such at the library beforehand, almost like we were possessed by something. At midnight on Saturday, we all gathered at S senpai's house and then he drove us there. We were all joking and playing around in the car, but it was clear that we were all scared. As the car turned off the city streets and entered the lonely countryside roads, I started to second-guess my choices as I looked around at the increasingly gloomy surroundings outside. There were no more oncoming cars, and either side of the road was just fields and forest. Kay helped navigate using a map in the passenger's side seat, and then he screamed, "It's around here!" I could hear his voice trembling. Looking at my watch, it was just after 1:30. We parked on the side of the road and then started looking around. I grabbed my cassette recorder and torch, and then secretly put a charm I brought with me in my pocket. D started taking photos of the area with a disposable camera he bought at the convenience store. S senpai remained in the car and turned the headlights off, plunging the area into darkness. But thanks to the streetlights and moonlight, we could still see a little. I walked around 50 meters down the road leading towards the mountain, trying to find the location of the crime, and I couldn't help but feel chills down my spine. Someone was actually killed around here. "Ah," S suddenly said before long. "What's wrong?" I asked, and S pointed to a slope nearby. There was an area where the grass had been cleared, and there were small sake cups with incense surrounded by flowers. I shone my torch over the area and looked at everyone. Maybe it was because of the moonlight, but everyone looked pale and lifeless. They were also silent. Pathetically, my legs trembled, and I felt all the power draining from my torso. This was bad. No matter how you looked at it, it wasn't normal. Nah, let's get out of here. This is no joke, I said. What are you saying? Kay replied. We just got here. We've got to do it. His face looked tense, while both D and S looked like they wanted to cry. But if a ghost actually appears, then what? D said, his voice barely above a whisper. Idiot, that's why we came here, right? But if you want to run, then go. Kay was no doubt scared as well. His voice was louder than it needed to be. But in the end, we couldn't go against him, and we decided to summon the spirit. Everyone closed their eyes, then put their hands together in front of the flowers. We counted to 3, and then we showed our sympathy to the ghost. I started recording and put the player on the ground by my feet. We all stood there frozen, with our hands pressed together. The only sounds I could hear were nearby insects and the occasional gust of wind blowing through the trees. With my eyes closed, I prayed with my heart and soul that the woman, I looked her name up beforehand, wouldn't appear. This was no joke, I thought. What on earth would I do if I actually saw a ghost? I had wanted to see one so bad, but now that the possibility was right in front of me, I realized how stupid that was. A short time later, I don't think even a minute had actually passed, looking back on it now, the air around us suddenly changed. I don't know how to put it, but like the density or the thickness of it. And the inside of my mouth felt weird. Like I could taste something burnt or rusty, and I thought it had to be my mouth going dry with fear, or maybe it was a warning that I had anemia or something. Then I heard a scream. What's wrong? I jumped in surprise and looked around. Kay was sitting on the ground, his mouth wide open as he stared at something in front of him. Looking closer, a woman was lying on her back, but her head alone sat up as she looked right at us. All the color drained from my face. It was like I was watching a scene from a movie play out in slow motion. I screamed and almost rolled away from the area, going back up the path we came from. D and S were already running ahead of me. Wait, what about Kay? And I forgot my cassette recorder too. Maybe it's hard to believe, but even as I was panicking, I was still thinking about that. When I looked behind me, Kay was still there on the same spot. Crap. I went back, grabbed my cassette recorder, and then hit Kay on the head. The woman was still there in the same position, but the outline of her body started to shimmer, turning translucent, kind of like bubbles, before she disappeared. I dragged a stunned Kay back to the path, all the while yelling at him. You said nothing would appear, and yet something did. Of course, looking back on it now, that was rather selfish of me, but that was honestly how I felt at the time. When we reached S-senpai's car, D and S were motioning like crazy for us to hurry over. Come on! Quickly! What are you doing? Run! As we sped away, we told S-senpai everything that had happened. Are you serious? His expression stiffened, and he kept looking in the rearview mirror. According to Kay, for a moment he fell and couldn't move, and during that time, he locked eyes with the woman. We all mentioned what we saw in turn, and everyone's statements matched. That was actually a ghost. The ghost of the woman who was killed. That was all it could be, and that was what we decided it had to be. The following day was a Sunday, so we all gathered at Kay's house and waited for Y. We wanted to tell him everything that happened the night before, and, because he could see ghosts, await his judgment on what it really was. Before long, Y arrived. His expression sank when he saw us, and when we told him what happened, he said, "I knew it. I had a bad feeling, so I figured you must have gone ahead and actually tried it." "You're the one who told us to," Kay snapped. "Yes, but a woman was actually attacked and killed." "You're the one who said it, right? It has to be someone with lingering regret." "And? Did you sympathize with her?" "Yeah, of course I did," Kay said. "I prayed that she wouldn't appear," I replied. "Me too. And me," DNS both said. "Was she really a ghost?" I asked. "Yeah," Y replied. "No doubt about it." "Our eyes met," Kay then said, giving a weak laugh. "She's there on your shoulders right now," Y then said. That winter, Kay took a temporary absence from school, and then the following year, he left. He moved with his family to Nagoya. They never said why they were moving though. Thinking about it after the fact, there are several things I still don't understand. At first, Y approached us because he was worried and didn't want us to get involved with ghosts, right? But then, why did he tell us how to summon one? And after Kay moved, Y suddenly started seeing Siko. She was Kay's old girlfriend. On that day Y approached us, Siko was standing next to Kay. Maybe I'm just imagining things. Either way, it doesn't matter now. And the next day, we all listened to the tape I recorded. Amongst all the white noise, you could hear a woman's voice. "She's saying, 'It hurts, it hurts,'" he said. But to me, it sounded like she was saying, "I'm upset. I'm upset." The man in this next story spots a lone woman on the side of the road one night, and, although suspicious, he offers her a ride to her destination. This small act, however, will change his life. Find out how in Understanding. There might be similar stories to this one here already, but let me share mine anyway. 7 years ago, the company where T worked as a driver went bankrupt, so he decided it was time to change jobs and become a truck driver. At first, he just drove smaller 2-ton trucks, but around a year later, he moved up to 4-ton trucks, and he didn't just drive within the prefecture, but outside of it as well. One rainy night, about 5 years ago, he was driving along a mountain road in another prefecture on his way back home when he needed to pee. He pulled over in a wide space just before the top of the mountain to relieve himself. The rain wasn't very heavy, but it was foggy and there was little traffic, giving the mountain road an uncharacteristically unpleasant feeling. Still, he felt better once he was done and turned around to return to his truck. And there, he saw someone standing by the passenger's side door, making him freeze. What was a person doing this far up the mountain, this late at night? As he nervously looked at the figure, they turned around. It was a young woman, perhaps in her early 20s. Her hair reached her shoulders, and she was wearing what looked like a company uniform that was drenched from the rain. Before T could say anything, she spoke first. "Please take me to so-and-so at the bottom of the pass." Her voice was small and faint, and yet he could clearly hear her. The moment he heard her request, numerous ghost stories T had heard went through his mind, but the woman looked so miserable and sad that he felt more sympathetic for her than afraid of her. "Not a problem. Hop on in," he said, opening the passenger's side door and motioning for her to get in. But as she grabbed the handrail and moved onto the step, T looked at her feet and suddenly realized something. Whenever you opened the truck doors, the interior lights would turn on. With the lights on, solid objects would make a shadow. But this woman had no shadow. Even more strangely, however, he didn't feel afraid. When the woman sat down, he closed the door and then returned to the driver's side to get in, and then he started the truck. As he drove, he cast sideways glances at the woman. She continued to sit there in silence, looking at the ground with a sad expression on her face. And so, T decided he would talk to her as they drove, even if she didn't reply. Perhaps she had been through quite a lot recently. "I don't know whether you've had some bad or upsetting experiences lately, but you can't be up here by yourself. There has to be somewhere you can go, right? I might not be able to do anything for you, but..." But the woman didn't reply to him. It would be another 20 minutes downhill until they reached the woman's destination. T continued having a one-sided conversation the entire time. "So, what's happening at so-and-so? What are you going to do once we get there? You're not going to return to that mountain pass, right? You can't keep doing this over and over. You have to keep moving forward." But the woman kept her head down and remained silent. T had no idea if she was even listening, but he kept talking until they finally reached the bottom of the pass. "Over there," the woman suddenly said, pointing just up ahead. It was an intersection in an ordinary residential area. T turned on his hazard lights, stopped the truck, and turned to look at the woman. "Thank you." Her voice was so faint he could barely hear it, and then the woman disappeared. "I'll be going now." Hearing that voice coming from somewhere nearby, T sighed in relief, started the truck again, and safely returned home. A few days later, T heard about the incident that happened at that mountain pass from a colleague. 10 years earlier, a 22-year-old woman was strangled and killed by her lover, who was involved in an affair, and he dumped her body there. And she lived in that residential area where T had dropped her off that night. T never saw her at that mountain pass again after that, and 3 years later, his wife gave birth to a healthy baby girl. Things were going great. T adored his baby girl, and she loved him back. Then, just this year, the woman from the mountain pass, who T had almost forgotten about, appeared once more. It was the middle of September, and T woke up feeling thirsty. He went to the kitchen to get some tea, and then, as he was on his way back to the bedroom, he noticed that his beloved daughter had rolled out of bed from next to his wife. He smiled at her strange sleeping pose and grabbed her to put her back to bed. But then, she grabbed his hand, still asleep, and said, "Thank you. I'm able to live here like this right now because you helped me back then. From the bottom of my heart, thank you." It was that woman's voice, coming from his daughter's mouth. He didn't know whether that woman had been reborn as his daughter, or whether she was just borrowing her voice to thank him, but he didn't feel afraid. He only felt a strange warmth inside. And now I, T, am still living a happy and peaceful life with my family. This next story appears to almost be the reverse of the last, with a young woman deciding to check out an accident scene near her work. But on the way, someone warns her to stay away. Who could it be, and why? Find out in Don't Go That Way. This story's about my mother. A few decades ago, when she was working in an office, there was an accident near her building where some city gas caught on fire. A crowd of people gathered to watch, and my mother and her colleagues got up to join them. But then, apparently the voice of some young boys stopped her. "Don't go that way, Mum." The voices sounded like they were in stereo, like two of them speaking at the same time. She looked around, but there were no children there, and she didn't have any children at the time. She wasn't even married. Confused, her colleagues said they didn't hear anything, but she decided not to go check it out. As they were on their way back, suddenly they heard a huge explosion behind them. The leaking gas caught fire, and dozens of onlookers died in the explosion, while hundreds more were injured. "You guys must have stopped me, huh?" My brother and I were born 10 years after that, and our mother told us that story with a grin. It's true, if our mother had been in that accident, then we would have never been born. It was quite the moving story. A young man living in an apartment building is annoyed by a neighbor constantly opening and closing their door at all hours of the night. But when he calls the management company about it, he's in for a terrible surprise. Find out why in Opening and Closing Door. This is a story about an apartment building where a friend of mine lived. I don't remember when it started, but the person living across from them started coming and going frequently during the night, and each time they slammed their door open and shut. One night, my friend was fed up with this behavior, so he waited for this person to leave their apartment, and then he went outside to talk to them. "Hey!" It was someone with long hair, probably a woman, and the moment she heard his voice, she stopped. It was the end of summer, and yet she was wearing a long coat. My friend was creeped out, but still, he was annoyed by the constant noise every night, so his anger won out. He raised his voice before he could stop himself. "Listen here. Every night you keep slamming that door, and I've had enough of it." But the woman didn't turn around. My friend was so upset he wanted to make her turn to face him, but the woman then started walking again, heading towards the stairs. "Hey, wait!" He chased her to the stairs, but then... Huh? The woman was nowhere to be seen. Confused, he went back to his own apartment and got into bed. He didn't hear the door banging again that night. And if the other person didn't want to talk, it wasn't like he could force them. The next day, he called the management company to complain. "Hello? This is so-and-so from room such and such in something something Heights. The woman who lives across from me keeps banging her door all night. Can you please do something about it?" But the person on the other end of the phone seemed confused. "The room across from such and such? That's weird. That apartment is empty." My friend's eyes shot wide open. There was no way. Every single night he heard noise coming from that apartment. There was no way it was empty. "No, that can't be possible. Maybe you're thinking of another apartment." "Room such and such, yes. That apartment is 100% empty." The person repeatedly checked, but that apartment was listed as empty. Before long, it seemed my friend finally wore them down. "Shall we send someone out to check?" they finally suggested. Of course, my friend had no objection to that. But once the management company checked the apartment across from his really was empty, he didn't know what to do. It really was empty, and apparently nobody had lived there for years. So then, who was that woman? A chill ran down his spine. A few months later, my friend then moved out as well. A few months after he started living in his new apartment, I finally went over to check his new place out for the first time, and we had a few drinks. As we started to get a little tipsy, I asked him a question. "On that note, this building doesn't have anything weird going on, does it?" I was just joking, but my friend's face clouded over. "Hey, I hear it at night. The sound of a door opening and closing. Bang, bang. Coming from the apartment down the end." "You mean?" "The other day, I opened the door just a crack to look outside, and a woman with long hair wearing a coat was there. I only saw her from behind, though." Apparently, my friend hasn't yet confirmed whether that apartment down the end is actually empty or not. A man on his way home from the convenience store encounters something odd. A little girl waving at him from a nearby house late at night. But who, or perhaps what, is she really, and what is it that she's after? Find out in Floating. Let me share something that just happened to me. I went to a nearby convenience store to get some in-game currency for the online game I'm playing. On the way back, there was this rather large house. It's not an empty house though, as an elderly couple lives there. As I was walking past it, I heard a voice call out to me. "Hey!" I stopped in my tracks and looked around, but nobody was there. "Hey!" Then I heard it again. I turned in the direction of the voice, and there was a girl by the window on the second floor of that large house. She was waving at me. I had no idea who this girl was, so I thought she had to be waving at someone else. I kept walking, but then again I heard that voice. "Hey!" I looked up at the girl, and she waved. "Hey!" I was the only person there. There weren't even any dogs or cats around. "Oh, maybe she is waving at me," I thought, and so I waved back. The little girl smiled brightly and waved back at me again. She was cute, and I couldn't help but smile back. For a moment, we smiled at each other and waved. Then, the little girl jumped up on the window. It seemed to have a screen, but it was the type that came off easily if pushed on the inside. "Ah, be careful!" I screamed before I could stop myself. Everything about the scene before me seemed incredibly unnatural. The little girl inside the window was clearly holding onto the screen, but she was leaning forward, as though trying to get a closer look at me. Her feet appeared to be on the window frame, but I could see her entire body, so from where I was, it looked like she was floating in midair. When I realized that, a strange gasp escaped my lips. I froze and stared at her legs. I was immediately filled with regret. She was indeed floating. It felt like a bucket of cold water had been poured down my back. The weather was great, but I was sweating like a pig, but also felt like I'd been dunked in ice. My body also felt strangely stiff and I couldn't move. What expression did that girl have on her face now? Was it a cute smile like before? Or was there a different meaning hidden behind that smile now? Either way, I couldn't tear my eyes off her feet. Then, after a few more moments, I was able to finally look up. The girl was still smiling and waving, but she no longer looked cute, and the chills down my spine got worse. If I lose my cool, things will go south very quickly, I thought. So I waved and said in a barely audible voice to the girl, "Bye-bye." As I started walking, I could have sworn I heard her reply, "See you later." It wasn't like I saw a ghost that was groaning or croaking or anything like that. But this actually felt even scarier than that. And finally this week, a high school student notices a classmate spends a scary number of nights hanging around the same street corner at all hours. But when he finds out the truth about why, it'll change the way he sees him forever. Find out why in Kuroda-kun. I first met him when I was in the first grade of high school. We lived in a big city, but not right in the heart of it. There were several convenience stores within a 3-minute walk of my house, but they were all Lawson's. But if I wanted to buy the latest fashion that was in the magazines, then I had to ride a train for 30 minutes to get to the stores, you know? This was the kind of town I grew up in, and where I met him. He looked like an absolutely normal teenage guy. He was a big fan of the manga artist Kuroda-kun, so I'll call him Kuroda-kun. Up until the incident I'm about to talk about, he wasn't really someone I spoke to a lot, or even thought much about. I remember it was right after sports day, so it would have been around the end of the first semester. By that point, I had mostly remembered everyone's names and faces, and no longer just hung around with my old junior high friends. It was late one early summer's night, too late for a high school kid to be walking around, but I was walking through the busiest area of downtown. I don't remember why I was there, but I think I went to buy something and then just hung around for a while after. Next to the sidewalk by the road, there were a bunch of tightly packed shops with their lights still on. As I was waiting at the lights, I saw a man with an acoustic guitar leaning on the guardrail by the spot where the intersection and pedestrian crossings met. This wasn't exactly a rare sight. I'd seen him there numerous times before, and it wasn't like he was singing loudly or playing his guitar at full volume. He was just sitting on the guardrail and quietly strumming the guitar, almost like he was waiting for something. As I crossed the crossing, I looked at his face and realized it was Kuroda-kun. He was one of the noisier kids in class, for sure, but I don't think I ever heard him talking about music, and he didn't look like he was in a band. So I looked at him in surprise, and he looked back at me with surprise too. "Are you in a band?" I asked. He smiled shyly. "Not exactly. I just like playing my guitar at night," he said. Being the cheeky guy I was, I asked him to play me a song. He smiled shyly again and started playing Sing by the Carpenters. I think playing the guitar is so cool, but I could never do it. I, a perfectly average high school student, cheered him on as he played, and when he was done, he blushed again. It's kinda embarrassing, so please don't tell anyone else about it. I promised him I wouldn't. I was generally a chatterbox, but I kept his secret, and then the summer holidays began. One of my friends at the time asked me to go on a test of courage with him. I wasn't really interested in such things, but I agreed to go once I heard a girl I liked would be joining us. This test of courage spot was a crossing downtown where a parent and child had died in an accident several months earlier. Apparently, people had often seen them standing there after that, so we were going to check it out for ourselves. At least for me at the time, I thought it was a somewhat cute and exciting adventure. It was a weekend night, around 11 p.m, I think, and we went over as a group. As we got closer, I realized it was the crossing where Kuroda-kun played his guitar. Suddenly, I wasn't so excited anymore. If this crossing really was haunted, then I didn't think Kuroda-kun would keep playing his guitar there. And knowing him, if he did see something, everyone in class would know about it the next day. Full of exaggerations, of course. And so, having lost all interest in the test of courage part of the evening, I turned to look at the girl I liked instead, walking ahead of me. Just past her hair, I could see the crossing. Kuroda-kun's silhouette was there too. Of course, no ghost was going to appear. That was stupid. As everyone else focused on Kuroda-kun and his guitar, I was bored out of my mind. This place is haunted, right? Aren't you scared? Yeah, I've never seen anything. I've seen people come here for a test of courage before, but they always leave when they get bored. There aren't any ghosts here. Kuroda-kun laughed and everyone else joined him. But this time, I was the one who felt scared. When he said, "I've never seen anything," he looked right at me. At that point, I was probably the only one who knew he played his guitar there every night. I don't know why he looked at me so cautiously when he said this place wasn't haunted. Instinctively, I felt like he knew something he wasn't saying. After that, several people decided to go to karaoke, since we were already out, and I decided to go home. As soon as I got back, I grabbed the class roster we got at the start of the school year with our classmates' phone numbers and looked up Kuroda-kun's. I debated whether I should actually call him or not, but as soon as I saw his number, I grabbed my PHS. At the time, high school students were only allowed those, and ran to my room. As my fingers trembled terribly, I dialed the number. And then, my sister called out to me from downstairs. "You've got a call from a Kuroda-kun." At that moment, it was the most afraid I'd felt in all my dealings with him. I went downstairs and picked up the cordless phone, but I was terrified and didn't want to talk to him alone. I knew they'd hear our conversation, so I went to the living room where my sister, brother, and father were. "Ah, it's me. Sorry it's so late." It was the middle of summer, so I was dripping in sweat and shaking so much that my teeth chattered, but I did my best to speak to him normally. "What's up? I just got home too," he said. The conversation didn't really go anywhere, and when I didn't speak, he finally replied in a troubled voice. "About earlier. You saw it again, didn't you? Let me tell you about it. Sometimes, dead people don't know they're dead. If you die without having the time to realize it, then the shock might keep you hanging around. But many ghosts still remember something or someone important to them. What haunts that crossing is the father of a little girl. The girl isn't there. Right before he realized he was dying, the father saw his precious baby girl covered in blood. His little girl was the most important thing to him, and the fact he was dying didn't matter. He had to help his daughter, but he didn't know where to get help. Numerous people kept passing them, and so he desperately screamed for help. But nobody would turn to look at them, and even if somebody did, they would run away in fear. Can you imagine how that must feel? For that father, he was forever feeling the life he held most precious draining in his arms. Seriously, can you imagine what that's like? So, what am I doing there all the time? Well, I'm talking to him. He keeps crying and asking for help to save his daughter. So I tell him that the ambulance will soon be there and that his little girl is going to be okay. After a few hours, he finally says thank you and stops crying. But the next day, when he sees my face, he starts crying for help again. That's why I'm there every day. All I can do is try to make him feel better and stay with him until he realizes that his daughter was saved and he goes to her side. And so I tell him that I already called an ambulance. As he said that, he gave a small, shy laugh again. For someone who was just a regular kid who didn't stand out in class at all, he sure was putting a lot of effort into this, I thought. Apparently, he started learning how to play the guitar in junior high, so that if people like us came along and saw him, he could say that he was always there. I honestly think he's pretty good at it now too. A massive thank you and shout out to this week's Kami tier members, Ella C, Emerald and Kenneth Kawamoto. It's thanks to your support, along with everyone else, that I'm able to keep doing this show, so thank you very much. Don't forget to check out Kowabana Volume 15, out right now, and check out our merchandise store at kowabana-shop.fourthwall.com. And if you'd like to chat about this week's stories, come and join us in the Kowabana Discord. You can find that link in the description or on kowabana.net. You can also check out our Patreon at patreon.com/TaraADevlin for exclusive bonus stories and extras, or our YouTube channel at youtube.com/KowabanaJapan for all sorts of Japanese horror you won't find anywhere else. Thanks guys, stay safe, and I'll see you again next time for even more Kowabana, true Japanese scary stories from around the internet. Want even more scary stories? Head over to kowabana.net for new translations every week. You can also join our Patreon for exclusive stories you won't find anywhere else. Head over to kowabana.net now.